The Dragon Prince has given us a lot of information about Aaravos so far, and indeed, Season 4 was perhaps the biggest burst of information the show has provided about this enigmatic villain. And yet, there still seems to be so much more to Aaravos to explore that the show hasn't quite delved into. There is a lot of potentiality to the character that the show has yet to really plumb. Aaravos is this alluring, charismatic, and yet demonic figure. Okay, the show appears to be setting him up as a kind of Faustian devil. He is one who can tempt others off the path of righteousness and toward his own self-aggrandizing and immoral caprices through appealing to pride, through appealing to knowledge, through appealing to the opportunity to provide a sense of certainty and coherence in a fragmented and blighted world. But the show needs, I think, to further explore not just the background of Aaravos. I don't need a lot of biological information about him. I don't need a lot of information about his past. I don't need a lot of information about exactly what kind of creature he is, other than a general Star Touch elf. I don't need to know how he's survived for so long there in the mirror and how that operation works. The show can provide that information if it so pleases, but that's not what matters. What matters is the emotions and the ideas and the sensations underlying the show and underlying the show's perception of Aaravos. This revelation of Aaravos being this evil puppet master who has been manipulating people for centuries on centuries seems a little oversimplistic, or at least the version of that we get in Season 4, when Zubeia is giving this grandiose, ostensibly confessional speech about the villainy of Aaravos. It's a flimsier portrait of the character than we have seen thus far. We have seen how Aaravos operates in terms of how he behaved toward Viren. Viren is not this inane moron. Viren is not simply power-obsessed. He is, but he's obsessed for interesting and personal reasons that relate to his attempts to create this sense of fundamental unity in a world that has already cost him so much, a world in which he has already experienced so much desperate, sorrowful loss. Aaravos should not merely be this explanation for why the world is a corrupt and degraded place filled with strife and suffering. An idea like that, which the show does not wholeheartedly endorse, but at least toys with in Season 4, is far too much like what one sees in a film like Spectre, a James Bond film where it's revealed that all the villains that Bond has faced so far were secretly all united by this one guy. As an action movie idea, that's kind of dumb but ultimately forgivable. No one goes to James Bond or Mission Impossible films for their lucid and delicate philosophical explorations. But what the Dragon Prince is ostensibly doing is different. It is more philosophical. It is more psychological. It's analyzing what people do when they're in situations of crisis and uncertainty. It analyzes and delves into how people behave when they are confronted by a situation in which these old concepts of continuity, of coherence, of a basic sense of community and shared experience degrade, and one is left in this malaise-stricken somnolent, enervated world where there's no life, no vitality, no real hope for the future. When you are in that situation, how do you behave? In circumstances like that, the behavior of someone like Viren becomes much more intelligible, not as simply the villainous escapades of someone who's evil with a capital E, but as the desperate longings of a broken and flawed anti-hero. Viren is not a fool for falling for Aaravos' traps. He's unfortunate, but he's not an idiot. And Callum, to the extent that he seems allured by the mirror, is not an idiot either. In such a bleak world, there is this liberation in giving into the darkness and giving into this sense of the grotesque and the warped. There's at least this sense of energy, it's a sense of vitality that can redeem, or at least make intelligible, this degraded, disinterested, apathetic world. Baudelaire, one of the great French poets of the 19th century, made so much of his poetic career on exploring this allure of the darkness to shake society, or at least the human mind, out of the state of paralysis and confusion. Now, obviously, there's a lot of irony in Baudelaire. He can be quite grotesque and macabre at times. One of his most famous poems involves the speaker taking his lover to the site of a rotting corpse. But there is in Baudelaire, nonetheless, this sense that this darkness, this miserable, reeking underbelly of society can at least be the rebirth of something new. Even if it's a cursed kind of new, it's at least new. Something similar is the appeal of Mephistopheles to someone like Faust, even though that legend is far more critical of Faust. There needs to be this sense of why the darkness is appealing. Perhaps on a general philosophical term, but at least on a personal and literal and experiential level. Or else it simply becomes a tawdry morality play. Becomes some sort of cheap horror movie where we're going like, "Oh no, Callum, don't do it, don't do it!" But even that, I think, would be better than a scenario where we don't really see any reason why Callum would side with Aaravos or would be tempted by Aaravos, even though that seems to be the direction the show is pointing in at this juncture. I thought that something the show could have done back in season 4 was to split up Callum and Rayla in order to meditate on Callum's feelings of anxiety and despair and this sheer sense of alienation that draws him closer to Aaravos, draws him closer to the promises Aaravos offers for some sort of clarity or coherence. It might not be beautiful, it might not be perfect, and Callum might have some second guesses, but it would at least offer him a kind of momentary relief. This is what we see with someone like Viren. But the show closed that possibility off at the end of season 4 by reuniting Callum and Rayla. And so if it is going to display Aaravos as being a tempter to Callum, it needs to come up with more reasons and more ideas for how the temptation can occur. Callum eventually needs to end in a position where he becomes alienated and estranged from his heroic role. He needs to view that grand place that he is in and his mission as the unifier of the humans and the elves and the head of this ultimate force to try and cause conflict to cease as being silly. He needs to see that as being futile and pointless or ironic. That doesn't mean he has to become nihilistic, but there needs to be this sense of bitterness. Even Harry Potter gets this right. My favorite part of Harry Potter is the first part of book 7. turned into the Deathly Hallows Part 1 when they're just wandering around in the woods. A lot of people find that section rather tedious. And the characters find it a bit tedious, but it is how the characters view it that is fascinating to me. They were in this position going through their years at Hogwarts, where there is this basic sense of structure, the structure of the school year and the structure of confronting some baddie, some antagonist, and sticking together and trying to make the world a better place. Now they don't really even know what making the world a better place would be, and that causes them a lot of despair. Alfred Lord Tennyson, one of my favorite poets of the 19th century, creates this more profound sense of malaise in The Idylls of the King, wherein, after the fall of this grand ideal of Camelot, of the Round Table, of this selfless devotion to justice, the knights become rather malaise-stricken. They become rather selfish, or at least self-indulgent. They have lost sight of the idea that something beyond their own individual caprices is possible. Even someone like Lancelot or someone like Guinevere can be consumed by the sense of failure, not simply because they believe, for instance, that their illicit coupling was wrong, but because they believe that it has betrayed this grander and more heroic ideal, and thus left them in the darkness. Callum needs some sort of darkness. He needs some sort of real alienation that would compel him to be more interested in the offers made by someone like Aaravos. Perhaps Aaravos knows how to tempt people with offers like such, and we'll see him do more of that, because Aaravos, in his youth, was such a desperate striver himself. I think that would be an interesting angle for the show to take, and I think it might take it in the future. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos just like this one. Keep watching The Dragon Prince. It is a great show, but I do hope that in the future it delves into this sense of malaise, this sense of darkness in season 5 and on. Not just, ooh, let's zap out all the colors and make everything grayscale, but this real sense of uncertainty. So anyway, tune in soon for my next analysis. We'll be coming soon. Promise you that. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.